Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers, so we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, Will, fill people in. Where are we recording this conversation?
We are right now at Ebenezer Church in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, of all places in the world.
Okay, and why Ebenezer Church? This is where you're from.
This is where I'm from. This is my home base. I am a pastor at this very church, and what's really cool about this church for me is this is actually the church that I came to faith in and grew up in, so it's a special place to me. So we're on my home ground, man.
I know, this is so fun. And for people listening, they'll know kind of where we're going with this conversation. I always say this just because it's not a secret what the content of this conversation is going to be. But it's always fun to do conversations in person. So we're actually in physical space. If you're just listening to the audio, you wouldn't necessarily catch that. But I love when it's been forever since I've done an interview in person with somebody. But we're hanging out this week as a part of our coalition class. You are like, how do we say it? You're kind of like adjunct coalition student.
Dude,
you're checking.
I am adjunct.
You're sneaking in. I don't know. It's been a good week though.
Yeah, it's been so good. So context is I'm a master's student at Horizon doing my MDiv. And I was like looking for a great class to take. And I was like, oh, who better to take it than with a coalition and hang out with my boy Jer all week? Isn't that an incredible thing?
Well, it's good, but the real win is it's been Andy Steiger, Apologetics Canada.
It's been really good.
We've heard from the whole apologetics team, which has been absolutely brilliant and so fun. And one of the things when we get a chance to gather and being in person has been so fun, we get to talk about ministry. And I would love for you to share with people a little bit of how you've been a youth pastor now for how many years?
I'm in my fourth year now.
Oh, that's actually a little longer than I thought.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
You're almost like the old veteran at this point.
Yeah, with the statistics, I guess so.
That's been a good run. I love that. Okay, so 4 years in ministry, you're seeing some really incredible things that God's doing through your ministry in the lives of students. And this particular conversation about spiritual disciplines, you've helped spark. So I would love for you to just fill people in. What's been really going on in your life and leadership that's helped you focus on inviting people into these ancient spiritual disciplines?
Yeah, so while I was in my Bible college degree at Briarcrest, what was going on in my life was, I kind of went into ministry with my head down and I ran really fast. And so probably between camp, which was I was working at a camp, a local
shout
camp.
them out. Can we tell them?
Dude, the Quest. I love the Quest.
The Quest camp?
Dude, it's called the Quest at Christopher Lake. It was the camp I grew up at.
No way.
I deeply love it. So I was working there half-time. Yeah. And then I was at Briarcrest as a student, and then I was also a Youth Quig intern.
Yeah.
And then I was also coordinating outreach. So basically I found myself doing quite a few things, and it was a classic ministry experience story for a young student. And I ended up probably clocking in 80, 90 hours a week of work time. And so basically what was going on in my heart was man, I'm so tired. I'm restless. I'm working 24/7. And then I launched, many young people did. I discovered this guy named John Mark Comer, right? And it was through this podcast called Fight, Hustle, and Hurry, then through his books. And then I kind of went down the whole lane of Dallas Willard and stream and stuff like that. And it was a transformational experience to be whoa, there's an ancient way of practicing the way of Jesus that is grounded and rooted, not in hurry, but in rest. And that was a transformational place that took place in my heart before I began at Ebenezer formally. Mm-hmm. And then that led into a space for myself that was how do I actually apply this into ministry and see a grade 6 student practice the Sabbath, for example, or fast, and also see that happen for myself. And so that was kind of the pivot that happened when I was quite young and young into ministry. And it's made a huge difference in my marriage, my ministry, and my life. For many people who have a pretty similar story to mine, that might resonate or maybe not.
It's so interesting, and I don't know if you have thoughts on this particular thing, but I wonder, what you said, you were hustling, you were working a lot of hours, and that a spark or a change that you make is in these practices, which is in some ways adding something to an already busy life. Mm-hmm. And there's something about I think for some people, and I know a lot of our volunteer youth workers listening, oftentimes are in the same demographic. You're in your early 20s oftentimes. Now, let me just say, my favorite youth workers are the ones that are, if you're listening and you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, like, God bless you. Thank you for staying with it.
Amen.
But oftentimes we struggle with, like, am I burning out? Am I going too hard? And our instinct is just to do, to pull back from, like, responsibilities.
Right.
But oftentimes, when we pull back, we just end up escaping into something that doesn't actually feed our soul.
That's good. Yeah.
And what you just talked about is that you were discovering practices that for generations have drawn people closer to Christ and have really fed their souls.
Oh, 100%. And so that was exactly it for me. So once that started to happen and I started investing into these practices and started to get spiritual rhythms and kind of find a way of like spiritual formation and sanctification that kind of actually made sense down like a route like that, I was like, wow, like what a game changer that was. And it's not everything, but man, it was like one way that somebody described it to me, it was like having a campfire. Like, a campfire is contained, it grows as you put wood into the fire. And like, that's kind of the way that I've seen the practices of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned John Mark Comer.
Yes,
some people would recognize, but has written The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yep.
I think that was the first one that I read of his. And so tell anybody, like he also has kind of this practicing the way stuff. Have you been a part of that? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, absolutely. So read the book, Practicing the Way. It's brilliant. It's definitely worth a read. And
which we don't get money if people buy it, but we should still link it.
We probably should link it, but no money.
I could become I used to be an Amazon associate at one point.
Were you?
Yeah, because if you can sign up for it, and if you're a youth worker, you want to make a side hustle, and then you just give them a link, and anything that somebody buys off of Amazon, you get money out of.
Are you saying the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast should become Amazon associates?
I'm saying I tried it once. I did it. And then I gave the link to my mom and my wife, which is actually, it was against the terms of conduct. And so I got axed.
You did not.
Yeah. So I'm not allowed to be an Amazon associate. But that's besides the point. Okay. So they should buy the book. We don't get money.
Yeah, we don't get money. And then there's a whole entire video series. So Practicing the Way is a brilliant resource, and I found it extremely helpful. And I'm going to go down this route here. We started doing it with our life group. So Emma and I run a life group in our church, and we started going through all the Practicing the Way content. It's brilliant. It's really good. And then I kind of started to itch my head and be like, hey, how do we translate this and take this content and apply it into a youth ministry? And that's basically what we started to do at Ebenezer Youth in the last 2.5 years, I would say.
I love that. And so give us a snapshot, because what's going to happen here is we've talked about this. So we actually you've sparked through this podcast the ability for us to share stories of how this kind of approach has shaped students, not just in your ministry, but actually in a number of different ministries across our country.
Yeah.
So we're going to get a chance to hear over the next few weeks on the podcast, if you're listening to this live, to how the practices, the way of Jesus has changed students' lives. But give us just a picture of, over the last couple of years, as you've kind of have instilled this into your students, what has that produced in them? What have you noticed in terms of how they're changing because of that?
Yeah, so the best way I would describe it is when I didn't grow up in the church. So I played hockey growing up, and I knew in order to become a good athlete, I had to train, right? Mm-hmm. And that was just basically it. It's if you want to get better, if you want to make the better tiers, you had to train for it, right? Some people had natural abilities, but that didn't take them far, right? It had to go hand in hand with training. And so when I came to faith and I started going to youth group, it was really interesting because there was a lot of people, and I would just kind of just say they just look frantically deformed. That was the best way to say it. And I observed it pretty early on. I was like, this is so interesting. We come to this youth group, we kind of see God as a mystery, which in a lot of ways he is. But then what kind of happened was I just kind of looked, I was like, man, lots of these kids I know at school, and they are not the same person they are here. It was really interesting. And as I kind of started to get into the Christian subculture a little bit more, what I realized was we just didn't train for godliness. That was simply it, right? And so I kind of asked the question of what if we could train our students to raise themselves up in the way of Jesus and godliness? And that was kind of the start of this kind of question, is how do we help our students to train for godliness, not just try harder, but train harder? It's kind of the way we say it at Ebenezer Youth, right? And so it started with doing a series on a rule of life, and we basically went through every spiritual practice of Jesus. And so practicing the ways of helpful framework, they have 9 of them that they have listed, and it's a really helpful way to go through it. And basically what we did is we went through all of those practices, and we started to write down where are we at with these ones, and how do we as life groups, because we go into something called life groups, which is just small groups, so small group ministry we call it, and we spend about 45 minutes a week in those small groups with leaders who lead those small groups, which is pretty typical. And what we do with those small groups is we say, hey, how do we move these small groups towards godliness and practicing the way of Jesus, and then accountability that has action to it? So that's basically how we've been framing it in the context of these spiritual practices. So for example, if we go through a practice a year, and then we do series that are introductory, like Rule of Life, or like something like the Story of God. And then what we will do is we will embed those practices. So say we go through a series on scripture specifically. Well, the practices is try to figure out, how do we memorize scripture? How do we study scripture? How do we do Lectio Divina? So all those different kinds of things that we're trying to aim to do.
Okay. And so you've been doing this in your ministry, like, over the last 2 years has been?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. And what are you seeing from students, just anecdotally? I know we're going to hear some specifics over the next few weeks, even from your ministry as well. But what would you be seeing in the lives of students as you try this kind of thing out? What's happening in your ministry?
So here's where it gets wild. So like for me, when I first started, I kind of was like, how do I like... Seeing students grow in the way of Jesus was like a question mark for me. I was like, I hope that like they come closer to God, you know? I hope by the time they're in grade 12, they'll like leave and hopefully stick to their faith, right? But I think the change was like, if I can like help them train for godliness, like we will know exactly where they need to be. It's a discipleship pathway is the best way to say it. And so a discipleship pathway is basically like, how do you help somebody follow Jesus for life? And that's actually our mission statement at our specific ministry, is following Jesus for life. So it makes it very simple of like, hey, I know exactly what I need to do here. Like I know what our mission is. And it's, how do I learn how to follow God like for my whole entire life? And what it's done is, for me, is our students come into the space not with a question mark of what they're going to get out of this by the time they graduate, but they will come into this being like, I'm here to train to be godly, to follow Jesus for life. And that's been a huge change, actually. It's been a game changer in the way that our students grow and the way that actually our whole ministry is framed. It's actually been quite incredible. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, even just as you say that, I think so much of our ministry, and it might come from this theological hesitation where we don't want to make it sound like our faith is something that we have to work for. So we don't work for salvation. And yet, when we show up and we do our ministries, and maybe this has been your experience for those of you listening, is that we just talk about God so much. And so, a lot of like, and this is my upbringing, like this is part of my experience, like, hey, let's talk about and just go into the cognitive ideas about faith. And what you're referencing is like, okay, but what if we actually let students practice it, actually do something with it, and like flex those muscles of faith that are absolutely essential, and that perhaps in the action, we're not just talking about playing hockey, but we're actually going to play a game.
That's exactly it.
And that could actually do something important in the hearts and minds of the kids. So I love that. I love the places that we're going to go, the stories that we're going to hear over the next number of weeks. We've already recorded a couple of the interviews.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
They're pretty wild, actually.
It is so wild.
And I think for you listening as youth workers, I think our hope is that you will be encouraged enough by hearing these stories, not that they seem and sound so far out of reach, but hey, these are normal, regular kids in local middle schools, high schools, junior highs, who their lives are just so different, and they've been transformed, and they're so encouraging that, perhaps us as youth workers across our country, Canada and beyond, that we would take these kinds of things seriously and learn from each other in this regard. So I'm excited. What else would you want youth workers to hear or to know when you think about spiritual disciplines, about practicing the way?
Yeah. Something really interesting is, I think as youth workers, like for me, at least, this is my personal experience, is like I get overwhelmed thinking about how do I help these students actually grow in the way of Jesus? And something that haunts me every day is like that all these students would leave their faith. You know what I'm saying? And like that's actually something that I think about all the time. And I sometimes think that our antidote is that we just need to try harder, we need to preach better, and like just kind of like put our head down and go faster and disciple our students better kind of thing. But what if we actually just put it back into the hands of our students and like allowed them, like as Paul says, to help them train for godliness? Like that's actually the big thing. And I think the student stories we will hear are students who have almost been self-motivated. Like I think of one student in our ministry right now, and we didn't interview her, so I'm going to use her as an example. Like she got fired up about witnessing, like sharing her faith, evangelism. And like basically we just were going through a series on sharing our faith, and we actually said, hey, like we're not just going to talk about sharing our faith, we want to challenge you to it. And she started a student-led alpha through like an application through a wider regional thing that was going on. And like, this has like projected her into this amazing space of her being so fired up for Jesus. It's become contagious in our whole church, not just the youth ministry. And it's been incredible. Like, so I'd say like, if we allow God to be the end of this, like not us, meaning like we're trying to work harder for our students to do this, but we say, hey, like let's put this into the hands of our students so that they could grow and train for godliness. It will like unleash something incredible. And I think it's almost like, for me, the way that I'm seeing it is it's not us trying harder. It's these students like kind of catching onto this vision and then being like, I need to run with this and go. And for us here, what it's created is we have a lot of leaders who are fired up for Jesus, who like want to like do more, speak more, like share their faith more and like kind of grow in the way of Jesus. So it's been this really cool thing to temper and like to figure out how to work with. Whereas usually we're struggling with the other way around. And I think it's just simply come from them being like, hey, like I've realized something that I can actually grow in Jesus and like follow him for life and like actually see like fruit from it. Like I can actually play the game of hockey, right? Like the game of walking with Jesus for life. And it's been a really cool thing that we've seen. It's not everything. There's 100% like, it's not Disneyland over here, but it's been really cool.
Well, and I think I love that you articulated about your leaders as well, because I think for us as volunteers, when you think about, hey, what do I want for my students? How do I want them to experience Jesus? And then maybe, and if you're listening to this live and maybe your ministry, if you're in a church or a club ministry that's paused for the summer, this is a great time to reimagine even your own journey so that you can experience God in the ways that you hope your students would experience God too. Now, you mentioned, and that maybe this is kind of coming in as a close, that this has been transformative even for your ministry. And so give people a snapshot. I know this is just a picture of what God's doing. It's not the complete picture. Okay. It's not the only thing. But when you this has been your spot, your church. Yep. When you started here back in the 4 years ago, it was like I was at your youth group this last week. It's pretty sizable. So you were influencing maybe back a few years ago when you started. How many students were part of the ministry?
20 to 30.
20 to 30, which is pretty typical. That sounds like a normal youth group, a youth ministry in Canada. Lots of ways, it's pretty healthy. 20, 30, that's awesome. And then this last year, what are you seeing in terms of the influence you have amongst students for your ministry? What size are we at now?
Yeah, about 350 to 400 or so.
And that's like the students that are engaged in your ministry, you've got them on a roster somewhere, you know who they are. That's unbelievable. And so, hey, if you're listening, again, what a cool opportunity. There's kids that need Jesus in your community. Mm. And isn't it crazy that the more you lead them closer to him in these kinds of ways, that actually sparks and that the gospel spreads and more students get a chance to experience Christ in that way.
100%. Yeah. It's the best reproducible tool. And you're not like building them off of like, hey, I'm coming back so I can like experience like an even more hype game that the world does a better job at offering. But the one thing we can offer is like Jesus and like following his ways. And that's basically what we've seen. And so I like to say if I died tomorrow, I think our ministry would continue to grow, which is a really exciting thing to me to actually think about.
I love it. All right, Will. Well, thanks for sparking this for us for the next number of weeks. Thanks for sourcing a ton of the stories. Yeah. We're looking forward that you'll get a chance to interview lots of different folks. And we're excited. And so youth workers, if you're not subscribed, smash that subscribe button.
Dude, smash the subscribe button 3 times.
Yeah. And it's just a podcast, so you can like things, but probably not that. It's just subscribe. Just come along on the journey. It's going to be fun. You
can download the episodes as well, actually. And that also helps build traction. Believe it or not.
Well, download on your phone, like in your podcast app. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But like download and then listen later. Like that's the idea.
No, if you download, it actually increases the traction. It's pretty great. So please do that.
Okay, there we go.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week for the first conversation with students that are experiencing Jesus.
It's going to be a lot of fun.